Now, to talk to us about what to look out for on the international front for 2026, we're joined by SABC News Specialist Correspondent, Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. 2025 has been an incredibly busy year on the international front, but 2026 is already shaping up to what will be quite a busy year as well. And I want to start with what's been quite controversial this week, and that is on Christmas Day, Donald Trump approving and conducting joint airstrikes in the northwestern part of Nigeria for what he calls Christian prosecution, but for what the Nigerian government rejects and says, no, there's no such thing as Christian prosecution here in Nigeria. In fact, we're just focusing on terrorism in the northwestern part of Nigeria. What do we understand to be the facts of that operation?
Well, we know that President Trump had indicated earlier on that he will use all means necessary to protect Christians, not only in Nigeria but around the world, after those allegations came up in terms of people saying that Christian community or communities are targeted in Nigeria by the insurgents or extremists. And therefore, he then took upon himself to indicate that he will launch attacks and to deal with those extremists and insurgents. But, you know, he likes to link it to Islamic State, and therefore him saying that he will deal with those people. But we know that the Nigerian government has dismissed reports that Christians in particular are targeted. They are saying it's a question of terror attacks, and it's directed at all the citizens of those areas there, irrespective of their political inclination or religious inclination. And the fact that where the missiles struck, it's a majority Muslim community there. And therefore, Muslim community cannot attack themselves if you are saying you are targeting areas of Christian in those areas. And therefore, that is a very controversial issue right now, much as they did work together on the intelligence. Now, my question also is, if Nigeria says they cooperated with the U.S. on intelligence, how did it happen that they gave America wrong intelligence? Because where the missile landed, it's not necessarily where you have this problem. And therefore the question is it true that they were cooperating?
Yeah, one would imagine that Nigeria would have hoped the best, that America would respect the intelligence they've given them on the operations of Boko Haram there. But the northern part has long been plagued by issues of terrorism and a security crisis there. Why is it important for Nigeria now to use U.S. military equipment and U.S. military cooperation to respond to Boko Haram in the north?
That's exactly what people are asking, and many analysts are asking. If you have the intelligence, you know where these people are, you give it to the U.S., you have your own military, you have your own security enforcement. Why are you not dealing with that problem yourself? Because we recently saw Nigeria participating in stopping the coup in Benin using its military capacity. Now, they can't even deal with their own security in the north, but they are able to fly to another country to assist another country with security challenges. And therefore, that is why I'm saying the fact that the authorities in Nigeria are not available to really share information and avail themselves for interviews? Because these are the questions that the media would want to ask. If you had this intelligence, why you didn't act? Why did you ask America to use missiles? Missile it's a strong caliber weapon for war. Are you saying there's war in Nigeria that you can't even handle? You kept saying it's a security challenge of insurgents, but the missiles, it's in a war situation, and therefore it's quite confusing, that situation, what happened and why this, or the Nigerians themselves or Nigerian authority, the president in particular, he has lost control or the narrative of this issue.
Yeah. Of course, we know that the northwest of Nigeria is quite oil-rich, with the Niger Delta being part of that region of the country. Sophie, I want us to go to what's going on in Somalia and Somaliland. Somaliland is what is commonly known as the northernmost part of Somalia, which also borders Ethiopia. Now, they've fought off to be their own country for quite a while, but they're not recognized by any credible body as a sovereign state. Israel now recognizes Somaliland as a sovereign state. Why is it of interest to Israel?
There's a bigger story there. You know that since the conflict in the Middle East in recent time, you had a problem in the Suez Canal, and also as it relates to the Red Sea in general, and the vessels from U.S. and also goods that are going to Israel. You had those Houthis attacking those vessels, and therefore that led to challenges of supply chain, particularly for Israel. And therefore Israel is reaching out to Somaliland, that piece, because they know that it is the strategic area as it relates to access to the Red Sea. And they know that if they have a good relationship with those in Somaliland, they will be able to have military base there, including the United States of America. And therefore, they can monitor Yemen, they can monitor Iran, but also ensure that the goods going to Israel and any cargo ship going to Israel or coming from the United States of America, they are able to sail without any hindrance. And therefore, it is a strategic route. And secondly, they also want to use it, as we are told, to push the people of Gaza to move out of Gaza, and that's the portion that they can go to, or the area that they can go to. Now, the Middle East and the northern countries on the continent have a relationship under the umbrella of the Arab League. We saw many Arab League member states condemning the decision by Israel to recognize Somaliland, supporting Somalia, including the European Union and the AU. Now, the issue here is that, unfortunately, we expect the United States of America to join because they also would want to have more control in the Red Sea because it has been very problematic for the U.S. And therefore, unfortunately, the Horn of Africa has very, very serious challenges because when you look at the tension between Eritrea and Ethiopia, that whole area, Sudan, there's a scramble for that part of the world or the continent. And you have countries outside the continent who have vested interest. For example, the United Arab Emirates, it's likely going to support Somaliland because they have interest also. We saw the countries in the Middle East and in the North, particularly Egypt, questioning Ethiopia's decision to push to have activities in part of the Red Sea. And therefore, that whole area there are serious challenges. Yeah. And unfortunately, IGAD now is found wanting as the regional organization.
Yeah, that strip through which it gives them access to the Red Sea is the Bab el-Mandeb strip. And a country that's also part of that strip is Djibouti. Now, America already has military bases in Djibouti. It is where it had, in fact, fought the Yemenis and as well as the Houthis from. Why is that military base not sufficient enough? Why do they need additional military bases, both Israel and America? And I guess you can add to that the UAE in Somaliland, when they already have facilities in Djibouti, which is along that strip.
I think it will give them more strength to monitor Iran, to monitor Yemen, and therefore you have more areas to operate from and to do surveillance. And therefore that part of the country becomes, or that portion of Somalia becomes strategic. And they are taking advantage of the fact that Somaliland wants to be autonomous. And you know, these big powers, where there's divisions, they use those divisions to push for their interests. We know America has made it clear that anything that stands in front of its country interest, they will use any means to ensure that that doesn't happen. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, last week, when he was doing that long discussion and the press briefing with the media, he painted the picture very clear in terms of what America wants. You touch our interest, we will go for you, and we will use any means or any area where we can operate. And therefore, it becomes strategic. But also, you know, the relationship with Israel. America always supports Israel, and therefore, it will continue to support Israel because they always support Israel. And Israel is fully aware that it will get support from the United States of America. And unfortunately, as I pointed out, even within the Arab League, majority, yes, support Somalia, but the issue of the United Arab Emirates and Saudi not seeing eye to eye on certain issues, I can confidently say that the United Arab Emirates might take a different view.
Yeah, one would imagine that the Houthis and Hezbollah would certainly resist this recognition and any sort of military bases that would be erected along that strip. A third of the world's ships passes through there. So it's strategically important for everyone else. I want us to focus now on Ukraine. They too have been enduring Christmas airstrikes by Russia. And of course, this happens on the eve of Donald Trump having to meet with Volodymyr Zelensky. One would imagine that the airstrikes that Russia had meted out against Ukraine will deter this meeting just a little bit.
Russia is very strategic. The attacks are aimed at pushing for Russia's interests. In other words, to send a message that whatever the outcome, we are ready, we are still strong, we will continue to fight. And this morning, we saw the reports of President Vladimir Putin wearing a military fatigue, talking about he will continue to defend the interests of Russia. And therefore, you can see that this was also part of sending a message to the negotiators that as you negotiate, you must know that Russia is not a pushover. And therefore, you are indirectly influencing the outcome and the mood and the discussions. And therefore, when they discuss this issue today, President Trump and President Zelensky, President Trump will be taking into consideration the recent attacks, and that speaks to Russia is still strong, it's still soldiering on. And therefore, when you negotiate, you are not negotiating with someone who is weak at this moment. That is President Vladimir Putin. And that's what he's going to say to Zelensky. It was deliberate. It was part of the psychological warfare.
Yeah, we know that the European Union Parliament had just passed a bill that gives a multi-billion euro relief package to fund the budget of Ukraine. Of course, given that many industries they have come to a standstill, and of course the country needs the assistance. But they still are begging the Americans for a military relief program. We know it was controversial in 2025 because Donald Trump wanted to make the military assistance package contingent on accessing the minerals of Ukraine, and eventually such a deal was signed. But this time around, what is it that Volodymyr Zelensky would potentially be asking from the Americans, given that they already got the military and military support package, but more importantly, that they had gotten additional arsenal?
It is not enough to counter Russia. And I think he is going to ask President Trump again that America must continue to make arms available for Ukraine to be able to fight. Because without...
Can I just ask there, Sophie, is he likely to ask Donald Trump to send American troops into Ukraine this time around, given that America has been very reluctant in doing that because they would ultimately not want to enter a proxy war with Russia?
I don't think he's going to ask the U.S. to join the war, but to continue to give resources to Ukraine so that Ukraine can continue to fight, particularly to be able to have the kind of caliber weapons or military that they can use to fight Russia. There's no way you will see men and women on the ground in Ukraine from the United States of America.
Yeah.
Unless that agreement of minerals is being put into place or is being implemented, where America can come and say, we are here to protect our interests. In other words, if they relate to the mineral rights. But generally, there's no way that will happen. You see now, even NATO itself, it's very difficult for NATO to go full steam because, the issues there, and the United States of America being the most powerful country within NATO. But I think he's going to say your support is needed, even if it's a strong statement to prove that America stands with Ukraine, but also to say push President Putin to come to the negotiations so that we can conclude or end this war.
Yeah. Sophie, thank you so much for that. Really do appreciate it. Sophie Mokoena, Specialist Correspondent for SABC News, talking to us about some of the issues just over the last week that's been happening on the international affairs front, but certainly set up to shape 2026.